Arun, can we start the meeting? Because I think it's already
Yes,
3
ma'am.
o'clock.
Yes, ma'am.
Or you have any other people to join in? Has everyone logged in?
No, ma'am. Only. Six. Ma'am, only 6 people are there.
To the group, is that all? Because we are all new to this group. So is that all, or is there anyone else to join in for the session? Do we need to wait?
Have to
Some more people.
We can start.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon to all. Heartily welcome to our ECO session 30. And before that, just I want to introduce myself. My name is Arun Chan. I am recently joined as a project coordinator in this program because I am a new face here. And today we have sessions on wound management. The sessions will carry out by Sister Sheba. It's for 40 minutes and followed by discussion. And after that, there is a case presentation by Dr. Anjana Suris and followed by case discussion up to 4:30. And over to Sridevi ma'am for facilitation.
Thank you, Arun. So due to some inconvenience, I'll be replacing Dr. Sunil for a while. So I'll be facilitating this next few sessions for your group. I think I'm a familiar face for you all. I've been associated with Pallium for last 7 years in various roles and capacities. So today's session will be about wound management taught to us by Sister Sheba. She was a nurse in charge at Pallium for quite a long time. I think she joined since the time Dr. Rajgopal started Pallium India in Trivandrum. She's one of the earliest members there. And now she's the charge of training program coordinator. There are various in-house training programs happening there every now and then. So she's coordinating all the training programs for Pallium. Wound management is a really important topic because especially for you guys, because we see a lot of wounds in people like paraplegics, quadriplegics, or any neurological issues where the patients are unable to move on their own. They end up in having bed sores. So I think more than us, you people will be dealing with a lot of wound, and we'll be talking more from a home care and practical perspective, what they can do at home in a very resource poor setting where they don't have money to buy dressing pads. So we'll be focusing more on that aspect, what can be practically done at home when you actually discharge the patient home. So we'll share our ideas also. We'll have to learn a lot from you also. So over to you, Sister Sheba, regarding wound management.
Thank you, Dr. Sridevi. Good afternoon to all. So happy to see you all. Some familiar faces also there. Hello. And today's topic is on wound management. As Dr. Sridevi said, we know what is wound. You might be seeing different types of wounds in your setup, especially bed sore. So we know how to develop pressure sore. There are three main causes of pressure ulcer. One is pressure. The second one is friction. The third one is moisture. These are the three major causes of pressure ulcer. We learned already what is palliative care. We learned palliative care is need for paraplegic patients and that bedbound patients. So they are the vulnerable persons to get pressure ulcer. So what is pressure ulcer? So can anyone say what is pressure ulcer? What is pressure ulcer? Anyone?
Anyone raising their hands? Ideally, we should hear from you people.
any discontinuity in the integrity of the skin. because of pressure or friction or shear forces.
Okay. So thank you, doctor. Here, today we are going to learn two different types of wound. One is pressure ulcer and the another one is fungating wound. So first I am going to talk in pressure ulcer, then move on to fungating wound. What is pressure ulcer? We already hear from one of the doctor. So pressure wound is, what is wound is on the discontinuity of the tissues, that is called wound. So pressure ulcer is if there is a unrelieved prolonged pressure is there. So pressure ulcer is a localized injury to the skin and other underlying tissues, usually over the bony prominence as a result of prolonged unrelieved pressure. If there is a prolonged unrelieved pressure there is a chance of developing pressures or over the bony prominence especially. So that is pressure ulcer. So what is the pathophysiology of pressure ulcer? The pressure ulcer, you can see that on a picture there. So imagine on patient, so on bed-bound patient lying in a bed. So because of their body weight and the bed's pressure, so that pressure extends the tissues. If there is a pressure there, the tissues are not getting adequate blood supply from the blood vessels. So you can see pressure for, if there is a pressure for a long time and collapse, if that leads to collapse of blood vessels. If there is a collapse of blood vessels there, what happened? The tissues are not getting adequate nutrition and oxygen from the blood vessels. If the tissues are not getting adequate oxygen from the blood vessels, what happened? Tissue ischemia, finally stress and breakdown of the skin. This is the pathophysiology of pressure ulcer. So then move on to the risk factors. We already here, friction. So this is one of the major cause of pressure ulcer. Imagine on for a bed-bound patients, we need to change the sheets, at least change the sheets every day. So how to change the sheets? Usually the caregivers, they need to change the sheets. So usually the caregivers pull the sheets under the patients. If the caregivers pull the sheets, what happened? There is a chance of frictions between the sheets and body. There is a chance of breakdown of skin. So, and the other thing is, when a patient, while we shifting the patient from the bed to wheelchair or bed to trolley, from trolley to bed, there is a chance of friction. So while we removing the sheets and while we shifting the patients, we have to give special attention for their body prominence and all. And the shear. Shear is for a obese bed-bound patients. What happened? There is a chance of slipping downwards. So when we reback to their normal position, we usually call it as 3 or 4 persons, and because of their health, we usually we give more pressure on their body and we push back. So what happened? If you give more pressure on their body, there is a chance of tissue injury there, deep tissue injury there. So we don't know whether it is tissue injury is happening or not. So while we moving the patient, we need to give a special attention. Otherwise, gradually, if you apply more pressure on that area, gradually the pressure sore will develop from that area. Impaired sensory perception. We know you have seen many paraplegic patients in their department, in your department. So for a paraplegic patients, they are not able to sense the lower part of the body. So here also they do they need to change the position, but they don't they are not able to move. So they are the risk group persons. impaired physical mobility. For a bedbound patients, they are not able to move independently. Altered level of consciousness, semi-conscious or unconscious patients also. Fecal and urinary incontinence. I already said the third cause of pressure ulcer is the moisture. Here, frequent fecal and urinary incontinence. There, what happened? There is a moisture. So moisture is one of the cause. If there is a moisture there, that irritate the skin, and there is a chance of breakdown, malnutrition. So here, malnutrition. If we know, so one of the prevention of bed sore is we need to change the position every 2 to 4 hourly or 2 to 3 hourly. Even then, sometimes the patients develop pressure ulcer. If you change the position 2 to 3 hourly, then the patients develop pressure ulcer, means there is a chance of malnutrition. So protein intake. If the daily food intake, we need to make sure whether they take adequate protein in their diet. Actually, 0.8 gram per kilogram body weight they need to take regular. And dehydration. So dehydration also, if the dehydration profuse, so there is a chance of blood volume reduce and the tissues are not getting adequate blood supply. Excessive body heat, again moisture is a cause, and advanced stage. These are the risk factors of pressure ulcer. Move on to the common sites. Pressure can occur anywhere on the body, depend upon the patient's position. So here we know this especially occur on the bony prominence. When a patient is lying on a supine position, occiput, supine, occiput, scapula, elbow, sacrum, ischium, and heel. These are the common sites of pressure ulcer points. Here is a common size. Usually the patients lying on a supine position. Here also occiput. These are the pressure areas. Why I am telling these pressure points is, so we need to change the position every 2 to 3 hours for prevention of pressure ulcer. So we need to tell the caregivers also how the importance of changing the position also. So when we change the position from supine position to side lying position, right lateral or left lateral position, we need to give a special attention for that pressure points, especially head, shoulder, elbow, buttock, heel. Okay, if there is a color change there, we need to give a pressure relieving, prevent pressure, that further pressure on that area. Okay, so that's why when we change the position, we need to give a special attention for that particular pressure points. Here, side lying position. Here also ear, shoulder, elbow, hip, heel, and all. But when they lying on the side lateral position, especially right lateral or left lateral position, between the knee is very, very important. So here, between the knees, the cause is friction. Okay. You can keep a small pillow or a small sheet between the knee for prevention of pressure ulcer. Here, Fowler's position, we usually commonly use it when a patient come with dyspnea. So they are more comfortable with this position. We know that here also head, shoulder, sacrum, but ischial tuberosity and heel is the major pressure point areas. But here we know the patient is more comfortable with this position that for a dyspneic patient. But even then we need to change at least 10 degree the position changing. Otherwise, the patients will develop pressure ulcer for that area. Here is a prone position. Prone position also head, elbow, chest, reproductive organs, knees, and toes as the major pressure pointing areas. So come to the stages of wound. There are 5 stages of wound. The first stage is non-blanchable erythema. here. So non-blanchable erythema means red color. So here you can see the red color. Non-blanchable erythema is, if you see, okay, from the supine position, we need to change it every 2 to 3 hours, you know. So here, when we change the position, there is a color change there, look like this. So if your finger, you can apply your finger on that area, that redness will be there. That is non-blanchable erythema. That is stage 1. Here, stage 1 management is prevent further pressure on that area. That is the stage 1 management. The second stage is shallow open ulcer. So here, or blister formation. If there is a blister formation there, definitely the skin will lose. So open ulcer is there, but there is red color only, no pus, no slough is there. Here, the management, you can use normal saline for cleaning. No antibiotic is needed for this type of wound. Come to the third stage, full thickness ulcer. All tissues are affected, especially subcutaneous layers will be affecting. Sometimes tunneling will be there. So the tunneling is a narrow opening or the passageway that can extend in any direction through soft tissue. So, okay. So when we assess this type of wound, we don't know whether it is tunneling, that wound will be tunneling or not. So you can do the proper assessment whether it has any tunneling developed. If there is a tunneling there, you can give a special attention for that area. Otherwise, that wound may not heal. Stage 4 is exposed muscle, bone and tendon. Here we can see the exposed muscle, bone and tendon. So we can discuss the management later for a third stage and fourth stage wound. The fifth stage is unstageable. You can see the black necrotic tissue on that sacral area. Here there is a extra, there is a black necrotic tissue over the top of the area. We don't know how much layer is affected on that skin. So when we see this type of wound, you can, when you document it, you can do a document is unstageable. Once you remove the slough only, then slough, after that only you can understand whether it is a third stage, fourth stage or second stage. So there are 5 stages of wound. The first stage is non-blanchable erythema. The second stage is open shallow ulcer. The dermis layer is breakdown. The third stage is full thickness ulcer. Subcutaneous layer will be affected. The fourth stage is bone, muscle and tendon will be affecting. The fifth one is unstageable. So come to the assessment part. So all the medical professionals, especially doctors and nurses, each that visit. So we need to assess properly for effective management. Okay, when you do the proper assessment, based on your assessment only, you need to decide whether what treatment is needed for this wound. So assessment is very, very important. So before when you start with the assessment, assessing pain. So we usually the patients not tell whether they have any pain or not. So when you do the assessment, you can ask them whether they have any pain. So assess location. We know the location of the wound, measure width, depth and length of the wound, stage of wound. We learned already stages of wound, presence of exudates also. Exudates means the oozing out the fluid from the wound. That is exudate. You can assess for that. Assess for tunneling also. If there is any tunneling there, you can give a special attention for that area. Chart the findings. So this is very, very important. When you do the assessment, you have to document it. For that, for the documentation, if you properly document it, the patient will be getting good treatment. So if you do the treatment, if you starting treatment today, so maybe when you do the assessment properly and document it, and the next week we will then do the reassessment and find out whether your treatment is effective or not. So the document is very, very important, and your colleagues also knows about the patient's wound condition also. So management part, we know palliative care, we have a lot of bed-bound patient and terminally ill patients, end-of-life care patients. So when we go and see these type of patients, we need to decide whether the prognosis, the patient prognosis is good or not. If the prognosis is not good, that end-of-life care patients, gasping stage. So here you can give a proper pain medication, at least pain medication you can give, and that cleaning and dressing is enough for this type of patients. Here you don't do the slough cutting and surgery consultation and all. So you can, according to the patient prognosis, you can decide whether it is a curative treatment is needed for this type of patient or not. And when you do the surgical debridement, so you have done lot of debridement in your department. You can give a special attention for the granulation tissues also. Okay, so you can clean with a normal saline for wound dressing. Always keep the wound covered and moist. You can apply some moisturizing agent like white petroleum jelly. So nowadays, moisture is one of the important fact for wound healing. So moisture, you can give some moisturizing gel also. So here, if there is an order, for example, there is a 3rd stage or 4th stage ulcer is there, you can apply metronidazole tablets or metronidazole ointment. So metronidazole ointment is costly, but you can, this is less expensive. So you can, cost-effective medicine also. So you can use metronidazole tablet. How we use here is, you can, we can take metronidazole tablet and crush it and make it as a powder form and mix with a white petroleum jelly and apply over the bed soap. So you can, this is one of the good medication for anaerobic bacterial infection. So you can apply metronidazole ointment for this type of wound. And charcoal. When charcoal powder, here you can be usually available the charcoal pieces. Nowadays the charcoal dressing is also available, but the thing is too expensive. Our palliative care patients is not affordable for that charcoal dressing and all. So usually what we prefer is, we can keep 1 or 2 pieces of charcoal and keep corner of the bed. That will absorb the bad smell. Avoid hypochlorite solution like povidone iodine solution and hydrogen peroxide. So that will be destroying the granulation tissue. These are the hypochlorite solution. So these the study says this, if you use this type of solution on the wound, if there is a granulation tissues there, that will destroy the granulation tissues. And finally, you can refer the patient for example, for the 4th stage ulcer. You can refer the patient for surgery consultation also, whether it is possible for skin grafting or not. So you can refer and take the opinion for the surgeon. And negative pressure wound therapy also. If you give a negative for that 4th stage of wound, if you apply pressure wound therapy for that patient, that will remove the exudate, the fluid oozing out of wound, the oozing fluid coming out of wound, that will remove easily and improve because of the pressure will give more circulation, blood circulation, that will help to wound heal. So here we use the suction apparatus for this type of wound management, the negative wound therapy. And homemade saline. So when the introduction time, Dr. Sridevi said, here we usually instruct the patients for how to make a homemade saline, and how to take how to do the home dressings also. So here Usually we are providing dressing materials for this type of patients in palliative care setup. But if the dressing materials finish, what they will do? So we can teach the caregivers and patient about how to do the homemade saline. You can take 200 ml of boiled water and add 1 pinch of salt. That is, we know this type of wound is not a sterile. So this is a clean wound. The clean saline is needed for this type of wound. And gauze piece. So how to make gauze piece? So if they have cotton sarees or gauzes there, they can cut it in square pieces and steam it, and they can use it as a dressing material. Okay. So when they come your OPD or when you see the patients at home, you can teach the alternate home remedies also. We know prevention is better than cure. So prevention is one of the major thing here, pressure ulcer. So change the position every 2 to 3 hours. It is very, very important. So you can, when a patient comes to you for a bedbound patients, you can teach how to develop pressure ulcer and how to prevent pressure ulcer. This is very, very important. Otherwise, they don't do the that changing of that position. So if you usually, okay, you need to do the changing of procedure, otherwise the pressure sore will develop. If you do the like this, they don't know how much important for that 2 to 4 hours changing the position. So the pathophysiology, you should tell the caregivers and the patient. If you don't changing the position, what happened to the skin? What will be happening? So you have to tell the caregivers and the patient, apply liquid paraffin and white petroleum or a white petroleum jelly. Otherwise, coconut oil is enough. Okay. So when you apply liquid paraffin, so when you change the position, so you can take white petroleum jelly or any moisturizing cream in your hand and apply all that body areas. That will give more blood that will improve the blood circulation. At the same time, if there is a small friction there, that won't affect the skin. Okay, that is the importance of apply liquid paraffin or white petroleum jelly on the skin. Waterbed or airbed. So there is, we usually tell the patient about the usage of waterbed and airbed. Here we can see the two different types of bed here. What is the difference between the airbed and waterbed? We usually suggest the patients. Anyone?
The airbed has a dynamic apparatus, so it can inflate and deflate sequentially.
Okay, thank you, doctor. So here there are two types of beds you have seen in the screen. So here one is water bed. We know the liquid exert pressure equally in all directions. Okay, when a patient is lying on a water bed, the body weight will be distributed in all directions. Okay, here so water is filled in the water bed. Okay, the major difference between these two is the water bed no need of electricity and the airbed need electricity. Okay, so if there is no electricity there, the airbed is won't not work. Here, as Dr. Jijo said, in the airbed is two chambers is there. One is deflating and the another one is inflating. When the air enters, that one layer is inflated, the alternate layers is inflating and deflating. Okay, somehow the pressure relief is there. But we need to understand that is here somehow the pressure is relieved, but not pressure sore is prevent. Okay, even the patient is in airbed or waterbed, they need to change the position 2 to 3 hours. So here the difference is the importance is when if a patient is using a waterbed or airbed, the chance of occurring pressure sore somehow that extends. So if the patient is lying on a hard bed, that patients might be developed tomorrow, the pressures of tomorrow. If the same patient lying in a water bed or air bed, that patients will be developing pressure sore. If you don't change the position 2 to 4 hourly, that patients will be developing pressure sore 2 days later. That is the difference. There's somehow the pressure relieving is there, not 100% pressure sore preventive techniques for that. And assess the skin. Here we know the stage 1 is non-blanchable erythema. If there is a color change there, you should explain the caregivers about the excellent incontinence control and the pressure, so the pressure relieving techniques also. Okay, you should explain how to relieve the pressure on that area. If you apply more pressure on that area, definitely the skin will break down. So excellent incontinence control is needed for the stage 1 ulcer. Maintaining good nutrition, we already said that patient need at least that regularly protein intake in their diet. Make sure that they in their diet whether they have take any protein containing foods. Here is a prevention we already discussed. There is a small tips for you. It says skin is a prevention of pressure sore skin. SSKIN. We easily remember the first S is supporting surface. Make sure your patients get relief proper supporting surface like airbud or waterbed or some pressure relieving techniques. And skin inspection is needed for this patient. The second S is skin inspection. When you change the position, you can give a special attention for the pressure point areas. And K is keep moving. So changing of position every 2 to 3 hourly. And incontinence, I is incontinence or moisture control. If there is a profuse sweating there, there is a chance of moisture. So here incontinence and moisture control is very, very important. If there is an incontinence there, you can tell the caregivers as soon as possible they need to change the sheets. And nutrition. This is the small tip. And how to engage. We know these patients need long-term management. These patients need the continuous care. For example, 2 to 3 hourly, one person should be there and change the position. They are not able to move independently. For example, for a paraplegic patient or an unconscious patient, they are not able to move independently. So one caregiver should be there for changing the position. So here, how to involve the patients and families for the pressure ulcer prevention. So we can, when we see these type of patients, develop a contract of care. So how we develop a contract? So here we can do, usually we, when we see these type of patients, usually we said, you can do this. Otherwise, the patient, your brother or your mother will develop pressure ulcer. So instead of using we can try to use we. So when we use we, okay, we can do what we we can do that we can see what we do together. So what we can do together. So instead of you can use we. They feel more comfortable. They feel okay. They will be there for helping us also. They feel more comfortable. So here, and then you can give some information leaflets also. Okay, so here we prepared some Malayalam leaflets. When we see this type of patients, for bedbound patients, we usually give that how to change the position, how to apply the importance of give a airbed and waterbed for this type of patients, and give small pillows and sheets between the knees and all. We show the pictures, and then that leaflets will be giving to the patients and caregivers hand also. So now we move on to the fungating ulcer. what is the difference between the fungating ulcer and pressure ulcer? Anyone?
Cancerous, like basal cell carcinoma. Can't say.
Okay. Any other points?
The ulcer is infiltrating into the tissues.
Okay. So thank you. Here there is a fungating ulcer, is a cancer wound is there. The picture is there. So you can see the disfigurement and look like a cauliflower in shape, no? So the major difference between pressure ulcer and cancer wound is pressure sore is preventable and curable. Here is not preventable, is not curable. This is a major difference between pressure sore and fungating ulcer. And as Dr. Gijo said, the pressure sore is infiltrating the tissues, but this is protrude out. Usually it's a protrude out. Okay, so here it is a primary or secondary malignant growth in the skin which has ulcerated and difficult to heal. So when if there is a this type of ulcer develop, this is difficult to heal. It's not curable also. It refers to the malignant process, both ulceration and involving both ulceration and proliferative. If this type of wound develops, the proliferation is fast and lot of necrotic tissues will be there. It looks like a nodular fungus shape. That is why this type of wound is called as a fungating ulcer, and it looks like a cauliflower in shape also. So we know there are two types of cells. That growth is there, one is benign and another one is cancer. If there is a nodule there, so usually there's some nodule development is the first stage of cancer. Gradually the nodules will enlarge, and if the nodules enlarge, what happens? That leads to disruption of capillaries and lymph vessels. Gradually, the altered coagulation and disorganized circulation there, tissue hypoxia and necrosis. This is the pathophysiology of cancer. Okay. So, Marjolin ulcers. Here, Marjolin ulcer is a type of malignancy of the skin. Malignant changes from the chronic wound, like, for example, burn, scar, pressure ulcer, venous leg ulcer. Here is a pathophysiology is different. If you see this type of that chronic ulcer, venous leg ulcer, burn ulcer is there. So appearance of mass in the wound. Usually it look like granulation tissues into the wound. So, but onset of pain, not previously present, and onset of the change in character, volume, and appearance of drainage also. These changes there, you can refer the patient to the oncologist and take a biopsy. Okay, you can find out whether it is a Marjolin ulcer or not. If they develop a Marjolin ulcer, they can take a cancer treatment for that. We learned that this type of wound is not curable and not curable, and it will be developing, proliferating fast, and this will be affecting the person and family members physically, psychologically, socially, and spiritually. We know palliative care is our main aim of palliative care is improve the quality of life of the patient and their family. Here, this type of patient there, we give a special attention, and we need to listen, at least listen their problems. Okay, then only they they come up their problems. If you don't listen their problems, we don't help this type of patients. So what are the physical problems? Pain, malodor. So imagine on huge ulcer on your face, or that proliferating growth in the patient face. That growth, one is we learn two types of pain. One is nociceptive pain and the another one is neuropathic pain. These patients might be develop two types of pain. One is because of direct exposure of the dermis that can cause nociceptive pain, and the another one is that tumor will be compressing to the adjacent nerves and blood vessels. That time the patients will develop neuropathic pain. So when you do the assessment, you can do the proper assessment whether they have any neuropathic pain or nociceptive pain on their wound. Malodor. Here also two ways. Here one is development because of anaerobic bacterial infection, that the malodor will be coming out, and the another one is tail exudate dressings have been more than number of days. That also another reason for malodor. Bleeding. So another cause when we do the improper dressing. So okay, so usually that adherent dressing, our dressing materials is adherence to the wound. Before we soaking, when we remove it, there is a chance of bleeding. Okay, so when we remove the dressing, we can soak well and remove it. Otherwise, pain and bleeding is the cause. So when we do the dressing, we can soak well and remove it. And another cause is, another problem is bleeding. That tumor will be protruding the major blood vessels. That is the another cause. Exudate. Exudate means we already discussed oozing out of fluid from the wound. Here also that dilatation of blood vessels within the tumor that can cause more exudates and itching. Itching is when the tumor develops, that small nodules will be developed from the nearest the ends. So that times because of the chemical reactions, the patients feel itching, and the another one is because of the exudates will be leaking leaking and touching to the normal tissues. That can irritate the skin and the patients experience itching. Infestation with maggots also there. We will discuss it later. Communication difficulties. Communication difficulties also here is when, for example, the persons with head and neck cancers. So they are not able to communicate their problems verbally. So here is a communication difficulties is some major problems. This type of patients, when they come here, what we do here is we give a small paper, sheets of paper, and we explain, we take problems in written sheets. So then we realize their actual pain. Sometimes if you ask, do you have pain now? If you ask, they usually know a little bit. So if they want to describe more, they need to write. Otherwise, we don't understand whether they have how much pain is there. So you can give a small sheet paper and explain. You can do your experience or your problems. They can write it and give it back. So that your care will good based on their sheets. Based on their problems, we can treat properly. Psychological, also altered body image. We know there is a small, we have a small pimple on your face. What if that pimple, imagine there's a small pimple in your face that gradually is increasing. We know there is one pimple is there. So that gradually the size is increasing. What if we get a chance to see the mirror, we go and see, oh, whether it is the size is decreasing or increasing. Here, there is the size will be increasing. Okay, that here proliferating cell is very fast, and the body image, altered body image is one of the major psychological problem here. Sexuality will be affecting. Denial. Some of the patients, they are not accepting whether the wound is worsening is there. So sometimes if you ask this type of patients, some patients, your wound size, we know the wound size is gradually increasing, but they are not accepting, not this is decreasing, but gradually they will be accepting. But if denial is also there, fear, usually fear, so what happened, and depression, anxiety, what happened next, and shame, the guilty feeling also. So the social and spiritual problems, family isolation. Sometimes the family members also, the members will be choosing a corner side room and keep the patient there. Okay, because of maybe the spreading of disease, maybe there. Social isolation, before the friends, if they have a lot of friends there, after that disease occur, they are not willing to see these type of patients because of misconception of disease also, maybe spreading, some misconception is there. Social stigma there, fear of contagion, effects on family and sexual relationship also will be affecting marital disharmony. So sometimes they are not, some persons are not willing to marry this type of persons, the daughters or sons, because of the misconception and maybe hereditary also, that will be affecting the person psychologically and socially. And spiritual also, interference with the religious rights and fear of impending death also. Sometimes they may feel okay, it is because of my sin, it's a punishment from God. This type of thinking will be there. So when you do the assessment, we can listen their problems. If you listen 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes, you can listen these type of patients. I'm sure they can give a proper, that if they have any psychological problem there, sometimes the caregivers are not willing to support this type of patient. When they come with their relatives, they don't tell you. So the caregivers is not supporting me. But you just go alone. You can you can discuss with individually. For example, you can discuss the patient and caregivers individually. You can take more. You can get more details from the patient side and the caregiver side. Sometimes the misconception is there, fear of dressing is there, fear of contagion is there. So these type of things you can take it up. And assessment. So as we discussed earlier, here is assessment is different. Here, wound location. So here there is also wound location is important. Here the importance of wound location is, we need to sometimes the mobility is involved because of the tumor. And the another one is you can, when you do the location assessment for a location, so you can assess whether the wound is easily covered with a public view. So they don't willing to show their wound to others also. So if you assess properly, you can when you do the dressing, you can maximum covered with a public view, that will more comfortable for this type of patients. Wound appearance, surrounding of skin, potential for complication. Here, potential, for example, for a head and neck cancers, that tumor will be compressing the major blood vessels. Maybe sometimes that tumor will be protrude and bleeding is one of the major cause. Okay, major cause of death. Here, this type of complication there is a head and neck cancers there. when you do the proper assessment, you can prepare the patient and the family also. If they're bleeding there at their home, in their home, what they will do, you can prepare the patient and family members also. Okay. And principles of management, we know, we do the second aim of palliative care is try to relieve their pain and other symptoms. Okay, so try to relieve their symptoms. If there is a pain there, you can try to reduce their pain. If there is an odor there, try to reduce the odor, and managing exudate and protecting surrounding the skin and minimizing the bleeding. Holistic care. Holistic care is a total care, physical, social, spiritual, and emotional care is needed for this patient. Empowering the patient and family in wound care. This patient need continuous care, continuous wound management. We need to empower the patient and family for wound management, how to do the dressing and all. So here, minimizing the pain. Come to the pain part. We learn to sometimes this type of patients might be developing different types of pain. If there is a nociceptive pain there, you can adjust the systemic analgesics. That is enough for this type of pain. And if there is a neuropathic pain there, like superficial pain, burning, pricking pain is there, your systemic analgesics may not help. That time you can apply some local application like Sensorcaine or Lignocaine. You can take it, and usually what we do here is 1 ml Lignocaine or 1 ml Sensorcaine and add 1 or 2 ml distilled water and apply over the wound and wait for 2 to 5 minutes, and that time the patients get adequate pain relief, and then we can do the dressing. Malodor. Daily dressing is mandatory, and a local metronidazole is for effective for this type of wound. Here is anaerobic bacterial infection. The drug of choice of anaerobic bacterial infection is metronidazole, and you can use injection metronidazole for irrigation also. Okay, so instead of you can clean with the normal saline, and you can take a injection metronidazole for cleaning. So if there is a pocket formation there, that injection metronidazole will go easily inside and relieve some infection. And systemic antibiotics, you can try 1 course of 6 systemic antibiotics for this type of wound, but we don't know how much how will be helpful for this antibiotic for this type of wound. That superficially, that blood vessels is not blood supply is not effective on the superficial area because of the lot of necrotic tissues are there. But you can try 1 course of antibiotic, and metronidazole is the superficial metronidazole is the good agent for reducing malodor, and systemic systemic metronidazole also you can give. Frequent changing of dressing depends upon the one of the cause of malodor is stale exudate dressing have been more than number of days. So frequent dressing is necessary based on the sometimes exudate, profuse exudate there. So that time you can use. Usually we use 1 or 2 Gamgee pad for covering that wound, but instead of 1 or 2 Gamgee pad, you can use 3 or 4 pieces of Gamgee pad at a time. That will increasing the timing of the frequency of changing the dressings. That will reduce the patient anxiety also. No hydrogen peroxide and betadine for this type of wounds. If you apply hydrogen peroxide for this type of wounds, that will irritate the patient's tissues. This is if you apply a hydrogen peroxide, that will not be helpful for this type of ulcer. So better you avoid betadine, hydrogen peroxide for this type of wounds, and you can use normal saline for cleaning. And bleeding prevention is we know here try to prevent the bleeding. For example, when we do the dressing, Okay, before removing the adherent dressings, you can properly soaked well and you can remove it. Otherwise, bleeding will be developed. That prevention is important, and apply local pressure. If there is a bleeding there, we know, give local pressure and sucralfate powder. The same tablet we use it as a peptic ulcer treatment. Same tablet we can use it for controlling bleeding. And tranexamic acid you can use it as a topical application, and systemic ethamsulate also you can use. Palliative radiotherapy. If there is a tumor size increase, you can refer the patient for one cycle of radiotherapy that will strengthen the size of the tumor. Size of the tumor, it will control, prevent the bleeding. Okay. Here, criteria for wound dressing is, our main aim is improve the quality of life of the patient and their family through excellent symptom control. So empathetic care is needed for these type of patients. We know this type of wound is not curable. So empathetic care is very, very important for these type of patients. If possible, provide a thorough bath before dressing. If they take a thorough bath before dressings, all necrotic tissues will fall down. Okay, without applying this, here we need to understand that these tissues are fragile. Okay, if you apply more pressure on that area, there is a chance of developing bleeding. So without applying your artery forceps, that all dead tissues will fall down. There is that is the importance of thorough bath. If possible, you can try to and encourage the patient to take thorough bath before you are doing the dressing, and make sure whether they have any pain or not. If they have pain, you can do a pain management first, and then you can do the dressing. Use normal saline for cleaning of wound. Select dressings depends upon the exudate and size of the wound. You can select the dressing. So, role of cancer therapy, radiotherapy, cytotoxic chemotherapy, hormone therapy, and surgery. Some debulking surgery also nowadays oncologists will be doing. And radiotherapy, cytotoxic chemotherapy, hormone therapy also. If they are taking this treatment, that will help to reduce the strengthen the size of the tumor. That is why if there is a chance of the tumor size will be, there is a chance of bleeding develop because of the tumor size increasing. You can refer the patient and patient to the oncologist and take a advice from the oncologist whether it is any need for a radiotherapy or cytotoxic chemotherapy or hormone therapy for these patients. And surgery also. If the debulking surgery is useful for these type of patients, they can do the surgery also. Here come to the last point, maggots we discussed earlier. So one problem is infestation with maggots. So how maggots come? How does the maggots come? Anyone?
Flies.
Okay, thank you. It's come from flies. So here when we see this type of patients, so if any wound patients, you can explain the caregivers and the patient about the importance of covering of wound. If the fly is touching in the wound, definitely the flies laid a lot of eggs, and as a result of maggots will come out. So if there is a maggots there, the treatment of maggots is physical removal with the help of turpentine. So you can take a turpentine, not pure directly. You can take the turpentine into the gauze piece or a Gamgee pad and use well, and you can keep close to the wound. That smell will smell is enough for that maggots will out. So that time when the maggots come out, you can remove the maggots with your artery forceps physically. Okay. Usually what happened is, when the maggots come out, usually you can go with your artery forceps. Usually they go inside. So if you follow that maggots, okay, that maggots is there. We don't know whether whether that maggots is inside or not. They usually when they go out and go inside. So don't follow maggots. Okay. So if you when they come out, you can take it out. Otherwise, your artery forceps will your artery forceps will damage or protrude the symbol break or damage the blood vessels or nerves. That bleeding is another cause from your side. So when the maggots come out, you can take it out. That is the management of maggots, and explain the caregivers and the patient about the importance of covering a wound. It's come from flies, so that is very, very important. When this type of patients comes, you can explain these things also. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Shiba. We'll take up a few questions before we move on to case presentation. We have 5 minutes for asking questions. Arun, can we stop sharing the screen and come back to a normal screen? So that
About the charcoal, do we get it from the shops? We make it?
No, sir, the charcoal here is locally available. The root, എല്ലാവരും മലയാളീസ് ആണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ പറയാം, നമ്മളെ കരിക്കട്ടയാണല്ലോ, തടി കരിച്ചെടുക്കുന്ന കരിക്കട്ടയാണല്ലോ, അത് നമുക്ക് എടുത്തിട്ട് ആ പീസ് മതി. നമ്മൾ ഒത്തിരി പേഷ്യൻസിന്റെ റൂമുകളിലൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ ട്രൈ ചെയ്തു. അത് ആ പീസ് സ്മെല്ല് അബ്സോർബ് ചെയ്തെടുക്കും. അത് മാർക്കറ്റിലും അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ ചാർക്കോൾ പീസസ് അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്, ബട്ട് ചാർക്കോൾ ഡ്രസ്സിങ്സ് അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്, പക്ഷേ എക്സ്പെൻസീവ് ആണ്.
Can everyone talk Malayalam in this group? Then we don't need to stick on to English.
No.
Okay, so there are people who don't understand.
Okay.
There were charcoal tablets available in the pharmacies before. I don't know whether it is available now. If the tablets are available, you can crush the tablet and put it over a gauze pad over the dressing. But what we can usually do is this piece of big charcoal, you can keep it under the bed, or sometimes people keep it near the bed, near the wound, wherever the wound is. It seems to absorb foul smell. And if you place it crushed charcoal tablet over the dressing, it is found to be effective to absorb the exudate also. But we have never used it because we didn't get the tablets to crush and use. But it is effective in absorbing the exudate. What is the routine management that you do in your setting for bed sores? Is it the same or is it different? If so, what is the difference?
It's almost the same.
You use the same medications like metronidazole and saline?
We use metronidazole and for promoting granulation formation. And also we use saline dressing. And we use the different types of debridement, surgical debridement, and we use chemical debridement by using papaya and papain, and the ointment is available. Papain ointment is available, and mechanical debridement by using the wet to dry dressing. And
sorry, I didn't get it. What dressing you mentioned?
Wet to dry dressing. We place a wet pad first, and then over it we place a dry pad, and after that when we remove it, we will be removing it very bluntly so that the overlying slough will be slough will come off with the cotton, along with the cotton.
Is that
So
painful when you remove it?
Yeah, mostly this will be done in case of a spinal cord injury patient. So they may not be knowing the, they will be insensate. So this is one method of debridement that we do, but only if there is too much of slough. Otherwise, we won't do this. Then, yeah, the rest is almost the same. And from this session, we got a few other points like utilizing this charcoal for reducing the odor, and how to deal with maggots. And these are things that we usually do not come across. Most of our patients won't have maggots. So we have never come across with all these kind of things. And we also do not see much of this fungating type of ulcers. Most of the ulcers will be fresh, maybe like 1 month's duration or 2 weeks duration. So we are not used to do this fungating ulcers. So these are the things that we got new from this session, and we are thankful for that.
So what is your experience with using the papain? Does that help in debridement?
Yeah, I cannot say that objectively, but we do feel that it causes removal of slough better than without using it. If the slough is so thick, then using it frequently or using it daily, the slough will come off. We either we use the papain ointment, or sometimes we employ the raw fluid that comes out of the papaya peel, skin of the papaya.
So you take that that exudate and that liquid from the papaya skin and then apply it.
Yeah, we pour that exudate from the papaya, the freshly cut papaya, into the wound. And we have not assessed how much difference it has brought in into the management, but this has been utilizing for quite some time now.
So one more thing I would like to ask you: what is the guideline or whatever you follow in terms of doing physiotherapy when the patient is having wound? At what stage you will not do? Till when you will wait to start physio?
Actually, I think Dr. Jijo will answer that.
Yeah, mostly we will start a bedside physiotherapy program for all the patients. And if the wound is not that big, yeah, we send them down to the department, physiotherapy section, after giving a dressing. Sometimes we may change in the evening dressing. But usually when it's a large wound, for a grade 4 wound, we usually avoid sending them down because the transfer itself may create more problems. So we try bedside physiotherapy, start bedside physiotherapy for them. And,
so there is no contraindication in terms of doing physiotherapy when a patient is having wound?
Not if there are no medical issues, we have not landed up in any trouble.
So you can give them passive exercises, and will you make them sit on a wheelchair for quite some time, like routine things? Is there anything to be changed?
If they have a sore on the pressure bearing areas on the ischium or something, we of course avoid wheelchair. But even if it's on other sides, we allow them to sit in the wheelchair. We tell them to frequently offload by lifting up their body weight.
So many times we have come across at homes also, when we tell they will be seen by physiotherapists at home to do the physiotherapy. When there is a wound, they just stop doing all the physiotherapy, telling that once the wound heals, we will come back and start doing the therapy. So I just wanted to know, is there any real contraindication if a patient, because most of them will have wounds. So, and you cannot wait for the wound to heal to start physiotherapy, because by that time it will be too much time. So I just wanted to know whether there is any absolute contraindication seeing a wound, no physiotherapy. Is there something like that?
Only if some skin grafting or some surgical procedure has been done, we avoid moving that area, definitely.
Is there any other question? I think I have been asking a lot of questions, but is there any questions from your side, or we can go on to the...
Practically, what is the diet you advise in pallium for when the patient has pressure? So anything specifically, or?
For the diet, we usually tell the patient to take protein in their diet. So at least the study says 4.8 gram kg per body weight is needed for on day. So based on we have here on we have had an experience here. We had have on half a home here. So usually the paraplegic patients with the family, they will be staying here, and our aim is for a rehabilitation purpose. Okay, for a half a home. So when they come with the family members in our hospital line, they will be staying here with the family and do the physiotherapy, and if they are not able to move from their bed to wheelchair, and our physiotherapist will be explaining and educating how to move from there on without the family member, the caregivers help, how to move from their bed to wheelchair and all. So once the one experience the last year, our nurses were doing the changing of position 2 to 3 hour lift, this type of patient, and caregivers worked a lot for prevention of pressure. So even then the patients develop pressure ulcer. Then we realized that the protein intake is very low for their daily intake. Then we make a diet plan, a diet chart, and we insist them to take protein intake. After that, bed sore is healed, and after that, when they come, we usually explain protein intake is mandatory for their daily intake, so that the pressure sore is preventing. So, that the main thing is protein intake. Dr. Sridevi, you want to tell?
No, that's exactly that I want. Protein intake is really important. It's very difficult to manage between the protein intake and the constipation on one hand, but it really works. They may not like to take that much protein also, because it has to be cost effective also. You cannot tell them to eat chicken soup and all every day. So it has to be either egg or pulses. So they can't eat a lot of pulses. Then it may cause gas, then constipation. So it has to be balanced, but it works really well.
Okay.
Can we start the presentation now?
Yes.
Hello, Dr. Anjana. Can you hear us? Hello.
Dr. Anjana?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Shall we start?
Next slide.
Okay.
Today's case is a spinal cord injury, traumatic incomplete flaccid tetraplegia, neurological level of injury C4, which was surgically fixed with neurogenic bowel and bladder, and gluteal and sacral pressure sores grade 4. Presenting complaint, weakness of all 4 limbs since 4 months, bedsore, buttocks and lower back region since 3 months. And the history of illness, patient fell giddy in his boat while at sea. He fell hitting his neck at the side of boat, developed weakness of all 4 limbs with altered sensation below neck. He reached Medical College Trivandrum 2 hours after the incident. Imaging was done. Necola applied and he was admitted to ICU. Bladder catheterized and diapers applied. Surgery for spine was done after 24 days. He had an episode of fever and breathlessness post-operatively. Antibiotics and supportive measures given. He needed ICD insertion. After a few days, symptoms subsided and he was in ICU for nearly 4 weeks. Then he was discharged to local hospital. PT was started. He had minimal recovery of upper limb movements only. He developed bed sores over his buttocks area and lower back, which was managed by daily dressing. And then after 1 month, he was discharged and sent home. From there, bed sore worsened. He had foul smelling discharge from the sore. And later, he was referred to and admitted in our department. In the past history, no comorbidities. Personal history, he was an alcoholic, occasional smoker. Bladder was on CBD, bowel on diaper, sleep was disturbed. He had frequent nightmares, appetite poor, and diet was mixed. Socioeconomic history, pre-morbid occupation, fisherman. He studied up to 5th standard, does not know any other job. Religious person, lost his wife in an accident 8 years back. He has 2 sons, elder one is fisherman, and other is a polytechnic student and stays in his own house. Functional status, he lacks bed mobility, supine to sit with support, lacks sitting balance, dependent completely in self-care, transfer and ambulation, bladder on CBD and bowel on diaper. And examination, vitals, pulse 80 per minute, BP 126, 80, respiratory rate 26, febrile, SpO2 96, local examination, he had pressure so grade 4 over both gluteal region, size 5 to 6 centimeter and 4 to 5 centimeter with slough, and pressure so grade 4 over sacral area 5 to 5 centimeter with slough. As a general examination, his obese patient has pallor, no icterus cyanosis, clubbing, lymphadenopathy, edema, elevated JVP, head to foot examination normal except a sacral pressure zone. Systemic examination, high mental functions, cries frequently, depressed mood, cranial nerves normal, upper limb flaccid, lower limb also flaccid, upper limb grade 2 power, lower limb grade 0 power, sensory light touch and pinprick impaired from C5, DTR absent, plantar bilateral mute, BCR brisk. Musculoskeletal, there was bilateral TA tightness present, respiratory system, air entry bilaterally equal, no added sounds, single breath count 16 chest expansion 2 centimeter. CVS, S1, S2 normal, no murmur, GIT, per abdomen soft, non-tender, no organomegaly, genitourinary external genitalia normal. In the investigation, MRI cervical spine, there was fracture C5 vertebra with grade 1 anterolisthesis of C4 over C5 and minimal retrolisthesis of C5 over 6 is causing spinal canal narrowing, hemorrhagic cord condition and cord edema. There was a hemoglobin 7.4, there was hypoproteinemia and hypoalbuminemia. Pus culture showed pseudomonas. Treatment, he was placed on spinal cord injury rehab program. Bronchodilators was continued. IV antibiotics was changed to oral antibiotics. Blood transfusions given twice daily, dressing with frequent wound debridement done. Diet modifications, PROM exercise, angle splinting, DVT prophylaxis, incentives, spirometry and chest percussion. Bladder, CBD, bowel, establishing bowel program, and then he was discharged at request for personal reasons. And the psychosocial aspects, he was a major breadwinner of the family. He has nightmares frequently. He cries a lot and considered himself to be a burden for his sons. Education and job of his sons affected. Both are needed for his care. And he longs to go to church. The medications, he was on antibiotics, bronchodilators, laxatives, daily dressings were done for pressure sore. The main concern is the healing of the sores, depressed mode of the patient, and job and education of his sons. In the summary, a 54-year-old male with neck trauma and sustained cervical spinal cord injury with tetraplegia, which was surgically fixed. He had episodes of respiratory tract infection, has neurogenic bowel and bladder dysfunction. He has developed grade 4 pressure sore over both gluteal region and sacral region. He lacks bed mobility, supine to sit dependent. He lacks sitting balance. Is dependent in all self-care activities, transfer and ambulation. On the discussion points, recreation options in a bedridden patient, criteria for discharging a patient with pressure sore, home management methods of pressure sore, and empowering caretakers and monitoring health status of patients at home.
Thank you, Dr. Anjana, for the presentation. So we will just start discussing the points one by one. So what can be done for the recreation option? What do you do in your department? Is there any provision for engaging the patients when they are there?
The ward we have a television, but now most of the patients depend on their smartphone. So,
Okay. Oh no, is there anything else, any interactive activities? I have heard years back when patients come from PMR that they were all the time engaged with some games or something. Is it happening still, or was it in the past?
there is no regular program as such. But they have visits by NGO group every Thursday. So they teach them, it's mainly the bystanders who attend it, of the patients. Teach them some handicraft and that kind of.
So again, one challenge in all this recreation program that we can arrange is that once they go back home, it is different. Once they go back home, we may not be able to continue whatever has been given in the institution, but still we do encourage them small activities in the halfway home, like playing the carom board, all the patients. There will be two patients and two caregivers at any point of time. So there will be 4 people, they'll sit together, or some of us who are on duty at that time, if we are free, we just join them, and if there is no bed sore, they actually sit and play something. And there is a small indoor basketball thing which has been kept. So it is actually mobilizing their joints as well as playing and interacting with the other patients also. And some people do, as you said, crafts by the patients themselves. So if they have some capability to do some things on their own, we encourage them to teach to other patients or show it to us or show it to others, so that they feel that they are doing something, and they them kind of self-support group. They can support each other, they can exchange ideas or something. And one thing is that we tried is to fix a schedule for them, so that they just don't lie down on the bed all the time thinking that they are a patient, but they have to get up and do their things on their own, minimum support from the family member, even taking bath, washing their clothes. But for this patient, I understand he has a tetraplegia and unable to sit on his own. But general comment on patients who are on rehab, if rehab, is that to give minimum support from the family members, than just helping them with everything. We just tell them to do whatever possible on their own. And second question, I think Sister Sheba will be taking over. How will you discharge? What is the criteria for discharging a patient with pressure?
So we discussed for the management part. If there is a wound there, so when we discharge, they need to do the dressing. Here, this is on one of the bedbound patients. So when we discharge, they go to the home. So how will we do the dressings? They don't. They are not able to move the patient from every day from the bed, house to the hospital. So here is on important thing is we need to prepare the family members and the caregivers for wound dressing. Okay, so here what we do here is we bring the patients, if for example in your department when they are there, so with the caregivers, we you can demonstrating the here we demonstrating first we do the demonstration that they will be observing. Initially they are not willing to do the dressing, but gradually our nurses will be doing the demonstration part first, and the second day also demonstration. The third day some involvement. Okay, you can pour the normal saline to the wound, and the third day onwards little bit involvement is there. Then they gradually do the dressings independently. Then only here we discharge this type of patient. So here prepare the caregivers for wound dressing is a mandatory thing. So you should do the proper explanation and education for this type of caregivers. And when we discharge, the personal hygiene. So when they go home, you explain the how to do the normal saline, how to make normal saline, homemade saline, and how to make dressing material also. We discussed earlier 200 ml of water and add 1 pinch of salt, boiled water. After that, they can add 1 pinch of salt. That is enough for wound cleaning. And the another thing is same cotton dressing material, they can steam it, cut it into square pieces and steam it, and they can use. So before and after the dressing, after dressing, they can do the proper hand washing. Okay, that is the important thing. So these type of things you can explain it, and you can send back. This is the important thing. And covering of wound, the importance of covering of wound also. Flies, if the fly is touching the wound, the result maggot. So that important message, when we discharge, you can tell the caregivers and the patient also. If they open it, if the flies touch, definitely maggots is the result. So that things you can educate the caregivers and the patient also. So
yeah, so sometimes we do admit patients just for management of bed sore, and during the admission it will take a few days, anywhere from few days to 2 weeks. So as Sister Shiva was mentioning, initial few days the time will be spent to explain and show them. So we will not tell the bystander or the caregiver to go out when we do the dressing. They have to stand near us. So we will ask who will be there at home when we discharge, who is going to take charge of this bed sore. So either it will be a mother or a wife or a child. So whoever is there, we tell them to be with the nurse when they are doing the dressing. So usually in hospitals, the caregiver is sent out when the nurses come for bed sore dressing. So that doesn't happen there. They have to be there. They have to get used to see the wound first, because the moment you open it, they start fainting. Oh my God, I didn't know that this is such a huge wound. So they have to get used to that sight of the wound, and then gradually they will see how we are doing. Then they will start doing or assisting the nurse, and within a few days they will start doing on their own, but the nurse will be there monitoring all the time. How do they do, what all things to be done. That applies even to position change, how to change the position on their own, how to change the clothes, how to change the sheets. So everything will be done by the caregiver. So before discharge, we make sure that caregiver is doing all this on her own, on his own, for last 2 to 3 days. And they feel confident enough to. And actually, we ensure one thing before discharge. Some of our social workers, they try to visit where they are living. Like whether we train everything here. We train to how to use the wheelchair, how to go to the toilet, everything. But once you go back home, it is very difficult. It is very different from what we see in a hospital setting. So they generally assess if there is any problem of access to wheelchair or access. There is no place in the bed, near the bed, to put the wheelchair. So there are so many issues. Toilets, the wheelchair doesn't get into the toilet. They are well trained. They know everything. They are independent, but the wheelchair doesn't fit into the toilet, what they have. So there is no point in discharging the patient without actually correcting it. So go and monitor what happens actually at home. And if there is something, we have done so many things like that. People who did not have access to toilets, we made the toilet better. People with an Indian style closet, they cannot use that. So we arranged for a Western style one where they can actually shift on their own. Pipes at the hand level, small things, but we could do. Without doing all this, if we discharge the patient, there is no point in taking care of them well in the hospital. The moment they go back to home, they are in a hell, back with another bed sore and come back to us. So it's kind of looking at the family and where the patient is coming from and where they are going to. So that is really important. And when you ask for help from the neighbors and all, generally it's a good response. Like you can ask whether you can do something about it. Can you just come and help while shifting? So these are the ways that we make sure that the patient is taken care of well at home before discharge. Checking the home is really an important part that we do, rather than just discharging. we'll be able to know where they are going to, whether they'll be able to do all these things at home, or you can just verbally tell. That's not going to work. It has to be demonstrated properly. Any other questions from that particular point about discharge? Is it do you think it is it's a practical way, it's a logical way of discharging someone? This applies to everything. You start insulin for diabetes management, you just discharge the patient and the caregiver doesn't know how to handle this insulin. So before discharge, we make sure that the caregiver is the one who is taking the insulin for the patient, then only we will discharge. And if the caregiver is unable to do all this, sometimes the caregiver will be really old. They can't even see the syringe. Then we have to manage with the OHs. There is no point in discharging with the medications which they cannot handle at home. Any thoughts about that? Do you think that is a good criteria to discharge a patient with bed sore? We can't wait the bed sore to heal anyway. Any comments from the participants?
Yeah,
I think it's doable in your setting also. It's nothing rocket science. Just let them stand there when you do the dressing. Let them stand there when you do the physiotherapy.
Yes.
And regarding the recreation, as you mentioned in your craft therapy, we had attempted a few sessions on music therapy. Initially, they were quite reluctant to participate because none of us are good singers. So we don't feel like singing in front of the others. But then they are among themselves. None of them are good singers. So they started singing along with the teacher and they really started enjoying the music lessons. No one is there to judge or tell comments or anything. So it is meant for caregivers as well as the patients. So all these things work. There are many people who don't have smartphones or anything. So we give them a radio so that they can listen to the news or songs. Anything else before we wind up the session? So I think the most important takeaway point in management of bed sore is to find the cheapest way that they can do at home and to empower the caregivers how to take care of these wounds. Training the caregivers is the key in prevention as well as in treatment of bed sores. Once you train the caregiver from the minutest thing of changing their clothes, feeding them properly, how to clean them properly, till the point where they can take care of a grade 4 bed sore on their own. So that is the range of things that caregivers have to be empowered to take care of the patient. That is, I think, one key message from the whole session, because all the medications that you already know, that is one thing that you can start incorporating in your practice. Thank you everyone for joining in this session, and thank you Sister Shiba for the wonderful session on bed sore and malignant wound management. Arun, is there anything that you want to tell them before?
We shared one feedback from link. Please, I request all of you to attend that feedback and put your feedback, because your feedback is extremely important for us. The link is already shared. Please check the chat box.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see next Thursday for another topic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
നമ്മളിപ്പോ ഇതിൽ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ച് മാത്രമേ ഡിസ്കസ്